What's your name?
Lucifer.
Like the devil.
Exactly.
Our story begins long ago in the very capital of the universe, in a place called heaven that was filled with angelic beings who delighted to do the will of God. Under the Creator's just and loving government, all of heaven enjoyed an existence of happiness and perfect bliss. The Supreme Prince of Heaven and Commander of the angels was the all-powerful and loving Son of God. Most know him by the name he took when he came to earth, Jesus. He was one in purpose and mind with God the Father. Heaven, under the compassionate rule of Father, Son, and Spirit, proved to be a place of wonder, peace, and joy. To carry out the commands of God, the Trinity was surrounded by a virtual ocean of countless ministering spirits called seraphim and cherubim, or more commonly, just known as angels. These powerful and intelligent creatures found their greatest joy in doing the bidding of the Almighty. But God created one extraordinary angel to serve as leader of the entire heavenly throng. The Bible tells us that his name was Lucifer, which means light bearer. This cherub was the greatest of God's created beings and held the position closest to God's throne and directly under Jesus in heavenly authority. Lucifer's job was to communicate the light and knowledge of God's will to all the other angels. Lucifer was God's most splendid created being. He was captivatingly handsome and endowed with astonishing powers of leadership and organization. Among the angels, he was greatly admired, respected, and loved as a friend. Yet, God foresaw the misery Lucifer was about to introduce into the kingdom of light.
Full of wisdom and perfect in beauty, every precious stone was your covering. You were the anointed cherub who covers. I established you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked back and forth in the midst of fiery stones. You were perfect in your ways from the day you were created, till iniquity was found in you.
As Lucifer began to ponder his own beauty and power, his heart gradually started to change. He allowed his focus to turn away from God, and he directed his love upon himself. How and why these seeds of rebellion germinated in his heart, we may never fully understand. But the prophet Isaiah provides this insight into Lucifer's thinking.
How you are fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning. How you are cut down to the ground, you who weakened the nations. For you have said in your heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High.
Lucifer gradually began to covet the power of God, but not his character. As he thought about his own extraordinary abilities and beauty, the cancerous tentacles of pride and self-exaltation gripped his mind. This resentment and jealousy ultimately drove him to violate God's holy law and rebel against his government. We need to pause here and make something clear. From the beginning, God ordained the laws of physics to govern the material world we live in. Without these natural laws, the universe would be chaos. In the same way, God's moral law has always provided security and stability to the cosmos. Some believe that the Ten Commandments did not exist until the Lord delivered them to Moses on Mount Sinai. But Scripture teaches us that the principles of God's law have existed throughout eternity, for they're the very foundation of His heavenly kingdom of love.
All His commandments are sure. They stand fast forever and ever, and are done in truth and uprightness.
The Ten Commandments are a summary of God's character of love. The first 4 commandments describe who God is, His power, His territory, and authority. The last 6 describe what God is like, His honesty, His purity, His faithfulness. All of these things have always been true and will always be true. Now, for the first time in the history of eternity, Lucifer began violating these perfect principles. Lucifer knew if he was to ever share the power and status of God, he would need support. So he went to work. He began to deviously circulate among the other angels, planting seeds of doubt and discontent regarding God's leadership. At the same time, he would subtly highlight his own virtues. He insinuated that God was abusing His divine power, and His law was restricting the true freedom and happiness of His creatures. With his clever reasoning and unrivaled powers of influence, Lucifer managed to persuade a great number of the angels to join him in his mutiny. Perhaps you're wondering, how could so many intelligent angels be duped into following this deceiver? Well, keep in mind, up till this point, no angel had ever heard a lie. And at this early stage of the rebellion, the angels did not realize how obsessed Lucifer would become with acquiring the position of God. They did not know he would eventually stoop to torture and murder God's own Son on the cross in an attempt to seize His throne. Strangely, Lucifer thought he could conceal his true purpose from God.
Woe to those who seek deep to hide their counsel far from the Lord, and their works are in the dark. They say, "Who sees us?" and "Who knows us?"
Don't think for a moment that Lucifer's rebellion surprised God or caught him unaware. The Lord knows all things, including the thoughts of His creatures. He understood exactly what was going through Lucifer's mind, and in loving mercy, God warned the wayward angel of his danger. But in the end, pride and self-love would not permit Lucifer to repent. So he chose open rebellion against God rather than humble obedience. Some have wondered, does this mean that God created a defective angel? No, but He did create Lucifer with the freedom of choice. You see, the freedom of choice is a wonderful thing, but it carries with it incredible risk, including the risk of rebellion and the possibility that God's love might be rejected. You see, real love cannot come from a pre-programmed creature, and it can't be forced. It must be voluntarily given. For example, as cute as this little robot dog is, it can never really love me. I can make it appear to love me, but it's only carrying out pre-programmed instructions. It has no choice. On the other hand, this little guy is truly happy to see me. He's chosen to give me his affection, and given time, our relationship would grow and strengthen as I love and care for him. In the same way, a God of love only wants the genuine love of His intelligent creatures. And for that to happen, they must have free choice. Lucifer's rebellion is the greatest evidence that he truly had that freedom. So now, the big question was, how would God respond to this crisis? How would he deal with Lucifer and the millions of angels who joined him in his rebellion? Many wonder why God did not immediately destroy the rebel. After all, he could have easily vaporized Lucifer with a bolt of lightning. But would that have really solved the problem? No, on the contrary, that would have just intensified the doubts and suspicions that Lucifer had been planting in the minds of the angels. Remember, Lucifer knew, as no one else could have, the inner workings of the government of God. His destruction would have been viewed as part of a massive cover-up, and fear of reprisal rather than love would have become the motivating reason to serve God. No, the Lord knew in His wisdom the best way to meet the crisis was to allow it to run its course. This would be the only way to ensure that evil would never rise again.
Let both grow together until the harvest. And at the time of harvest, I will say to the reapers, first gather together the tares and bind them in bundles to burn them, but gather the wheat into my barn.
In the parable of the wheat and the tares, Jesus illustrates that a growing time is needed for a plant to reveal its true nature. In His infinite understanding, God knew, given time, Lucifer's real character would be exposed, and the bitter fruit of his rebellion would become apparent to all. Up till now, the citizens of the universe were unfamiliar with sin and where it would lead, but that would change as they came to see for themselves its terrible self-destructive nature. In the end, the wisdom and love of God's government would stand forever vindicated, and the universe would be secure. As Lucifer and his supporters brought the rebellion to the forefront, the Lord knew that there would be no peace if they were allowed to remain in heaven. A line must be drawn, action taken, and the rebels evicted. But Lucifer and his supporters would never go willingly or peacefully. The next step was war.
And war broke out in heaven. Michael and his angels fought with the dragon, and the dragon and his angels fought, but they did not prevail, nor was a place found for them in heaven any longer. So the great dragon was cast out, that serpent of old called the devil and Satan, who deceives the whole world. He was cast to the earth, and his angels were cast out with him.
The Bible doesn't reveal exactly what weapons were used or how long this cosmic conflict lasted. But this was a war the likes of which no mortal eye has ever seen. Revelation 12, verse 4 tells us that ultimately Lucifer and 1/3 of God's angels were physically expelled from heaven. But what next? Lucifer now had millions of angels on his side, but he needed a staging ground from which to continue his revolt. Soon, all too soon, the universe would begin to understand how painful and costly the wages of sin could be. For the war was not over. It had only just begun. Lucifer, the light bearer, had now become Satan, the adversary.
In the world's dawn, God created the heavens and the earth on the second day. And on the very same day, God created the angels, archangels, and cherubim. And these heavenly creatures would inhabit the heavens. The renowned Gabriel and Michael were among these magnificent beings. But there was yet another entity who stood out due to his beauty and splendor, known as Lucifer. He was the most important creature God had ever created. But although he had so many qualities, or perhaps due to that, Lucifer was taken by pride. This is the vice that leads to arrogance, vanity, and endless haughtiness. Pride was one of the 7 deadly sins. The proud Lucifer considered himself to be so perfect that he decided to create his own throne, placed even above God, since he wished to be like God. To accomplish his plan, the evil angel deceived the other angels around him. Therefore, the father of falsehood had by his side a third of the angelic beings who inhabited the heavens. Together, they would unleash a battle for heaven. But Lucifer encountered an outstanding opponent, Archangel Michael, who commanded the heavenly militia of God-loving angels. To defeat the Lord's angels, Lucifer turned himself into a mighty dragon and dueled against Michael, who wielded a flaming sword. Notwithstanding all his might, the dragon did not defeat Michael, since the latter had God by his side. Lucifer and his evil angels were banished from heaven. These angels fell on the earth and were trapped in hell. But Lucifer endured even greater punishment. He, once the most beautiful angel, was transformed into the heinous Satan. Lucifer and his fallen angels started to live in hell. But although defeated, Satan still wanted to avenge himself against his creator and decided to attack his greatest creation, humanity itself, which had been created in the image and likeness of God. A serpent-shaped Satan entered the Garden of Eden and convinced the innocent Eve to taste the forbidden fruit. And using his deceitful tongue, Lucifer concatenated the original sin, which caused Adam and Eve to be driven out of paradise. After that, Satan would devote all his efforts to alienate man from God, turning them into sinners so that they failed to reach paradise. Lucifer, the fallen angel, rejected God's grace, and therefore will spend eternity trying to destroy his work.
Before the biblical God created the world, he first created the heavens, and inside the heavens, he created the cherubs, the angels, and the archangels. The archangels were essentially the highest rank of the angels, and were the chief messengers of God himself. Amongst these archangels was the being known as Lucifer, the highest archangel of all. He was described as being the most beautiful creature that God had ever created, a splendid being that was perfect in every way. Ezekiel 28:15 described Lucifer as, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created." But Lucifer was so perfect, so handsome, so divine, and so strong when in comparison to his peers that he grew arrogant. His superior qualities to God's other creations caused him to become prideful, and pretty soon he believed that it was he who should be in God's place. He wanted to be God himself, and given that he was deemed worthy to be in the presence of God more than any other, and that he arguably understood God better than any other, Lucifer could think of no one better than himself to be the one to overthrow his Lord. As noted in Isaiah 14:12-14, the prophet Isaiah quotes what some suggest is Lucifer, saying, "I will ascend to heaven. I will raise my throne above the stars of God." It can even be argued that Lucifer's ambition is greater than God's, that not only does he want to take God's place, but wants a place even higher than which God sits. Pride would spur on Lucifer to act on his thoughts, that he was indeed more powerful than God. It was pride in which blinded him, pride which led him down a path of haughtiness, and pride which saw him begin to manipulate the other angels into serving him. After all, his intellect was superior to that of the other angels, and so deceiving them was not beyond his means. While some did remain loyal to God, many of the angels who, like Lucifer, would become known as fallen angels, began to recognize him as the superior being. While Ezekiel 28:15 notes Lucifer as being perfect in every way, he also notes that iniquity was found in him, thus diminishing his perfection. With a third of the angels on side, Lucifer launched an attack on God, and a mighty war for the heavens took place. But Lucifer was not counting on the strong resistance put up by another archangel, the one known as Michael. Unable to defeat Michael in his current form, thus lending Lucifer to doubt his own perfection at this point, Lucifer transforms into a dragon, as noted in Revelation 12:7-8. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon, and the dragon and his angels prevailed not. Neither was their place found any more in heaven. While you might say Lucifer had the courage to rebel in the first place, although many would say this was not courage, and more so blind arrogance, he is ultimately defeated by Archangel Michael. By this, we understand how powerful the biblical God actually is, that Lucifer is defeated without God actually having to get involved in the battle. You might argue that God worked through Michael in order to overcome Lucifer, but in any case, Lucifer's defeat is absolute. Revelation 12:9 goes on to state, "And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, as he was cast out into earth, and his angels were cast out with him." This is also where we see Lucifer referred to by his other namesake Satan, which he earns after he has been defeated. His defeat is more than just a loss of pride though. Lucifer loses everything. He's not only shunned by God, but he is cast out from heaven, along with all the other angels who had sided with him. Gone are his glory days of being the most splendid, perfect being of all of God's creations, and instead, he takes the role of the complete opposite. His fall to earth is described by Luke, who quotes Jesus in 10:18, "I beheld Satan as lightning fell from heaven." Lucifer's ultimate fate is detailed in Revelation 20:10, where it's understood that the devil that deceived them was cast out into the lake of fire and brimstone, where the beast and the false prophet are, and shall be tormented day and night, forever and ever. It's understood though that Lucifer would not tolerate his sentence quietly. In fact, from the very day of him being cast out, Lucifer began to plot his revenge against God. Seeing as Lucifer was no longer God's favourite creation, Lucifer would target his vengeance against that which took his place, mankind itself. When God created Adam and Eve, he tested them, forbidding them from eating from the tree of knowledge. Seeing an opportunity to scorn God, Lucifer snuck his way into the Garden of Eden, posed as a snake. However, in the early passages of Genesis, which detail the temptation of Eve, the serpent is never explicitly stated as being Lucifer. In Genesis 3:1, the snake is merely described as being a crafty animal. Therefore, it's likely that the idea that Lucifer is this serpent is merely ascertained by the members of the faith. While it's taught as scripture, it's not necessarily stated in these opening passages. Some may counter this argument though, by saying that Lucifer is referred to as the serpent, most notably in Revelation 12:19, where he is called that old serpent, and perhaps therefore the original serpent. Others argue that Lucifer wasn't the snake itself in the Garden of Eden, but that he manipulated the snake to speak on his behalf. However, again, there is no scripture to actually support this. Furthermore, when we look at the origin of Lucifer's name, we'll find that Lucifer is actually Latin for light bringer or morning star, or even the planet Venus. But how could Latin find its way into a Hebrew manuscript when the manuscript was written before Latin was even a language? Let's take the 14th chapter of Isaiah to analyze this, seeing as, believe it or not, it's the only point in the scripture where the name Lucifer is actually explicitly mentioned. Isaiah 14:12 states, "How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cast to the ground, which didst weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven, I will exalt my throne above the stars of God, I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation, in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds, I will be like the Most High, yet thou shalt be brought down to hell, to the sides of the pit." Many believe that here, Isaiah is referring to Lucifer the devil, but there is another argument, that this passage is actually in reference to a fallen Babylonian king, one who is mortal, and not one who is created as a divine perfect angel. It's understood that this king had sinned greatly in his persecution of Israel, and likely believed that he was beyond the power and punishment of the biblical God. In this argument, Isaiah in this chapter seeks to explain the king's folly, and not the folly of the archangel Lucifer. In fact, his usage of the term Lucifer isn't universal across all translations. In some versions, Isaiah simply refers to the subject as the morning star, or Halel, the Hebrew word referring to Venus. It implies that the king of Babylon, whose identity is not confirmed in scripture, was once someone considered in high regard, before his downfall, as predicted by Isaiah. But if this is the case, then how did it all become about Lucifer, the fallen angel? Well, that's not exactly known, but we can speculate that early Christian scribes, who were by this time writing in Latin, simply decided for themselves that this would be a great opportunity to fit in a story about a fallen angel. Going by this argument, Isaiah's 14:12 was therefore hijacked by these scribes and molded to fit their own narrative about the character Lucifer. By the time of King James I's translations into English, Saint Jerome, who was largely responsible for these translations, would incorporate Lucifer into the final version, and thus the metamorphosis of what was a Babylonian king who'd sinned for his arrogance would instead become Lucifer, the fallen angel of God. It would be interwoven into the biblical account of the fall, and would eventually become canon for some believers. The same can be said for Ezekiel's words in 28:15, where he states, "Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created, until iniquity was found there." While there are many who believe that Ezekiel is addressing Lucifer, other accounts indicate that Ezekiel is actually referring to an unnamed mortal king of Tyre.
Satan, the beast crunching sinners' bones in his subterranean lair. Lucifer, the fallen angel raging against the established order. Mephistopheles, the trickster striking deals with unsuspecting humans. These three divergent devils are all based on Satan of the Old Testament, an angelic member of God's court who torments Job in the book of Job. But unlike any of these literary devils, the Satan of the Bible was a relatively minor character, with scant information about his deeds or appearance. So how did he become the ultimate antagonist, with so many different forms? In the New Testament, Satan saw a little more action, tempting Jesus, using demons to possess people, and finally appearing as a giant dragon who was cast into hell. This last image particularly inspired medieval artists and writers, who depicted a scaled, shaggy-furred creature with overgrown toenails. In Michael Parker's painting of St. Augustine and the devil appears as an upright lizard, with a second miniature face glinting on his rear end. The epitome of these monster Satans appeared in Italian poet Dante Alighieri's Inferno. Encased in the ninth circle of hell, Dante's Satan is a three-headed, bat-winged behemoth who feasts on sinners. But he's also an object of pity, powerless as the panicked beating of his wings only encases him further in ice. The poem's protagonist escapes from hell by clambering over Satan's body and feels both disgust and sympathy for the trapped beast, prompting the reader to consider the pain of doing evil. By the Renaissance, the devil started to assume a more human form. Artists painted him as a man with cloven hooves and curling horns, inspired by Pan, the Greek god of the wild. In his 1667 masterpiece, Paradise Lost, English poet John Milton depicted the devil as Lucifer, an angel who started a rebellion on the grounds that God is too powerful. Kicked out of heaven, this charismatic rebel becomes Satan and declares that he'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven. Milton's take inspired numerous depictions of Lucifer as an ambiguous figure, rather than a purely evil one. Milton's Lucifer later became an iconic character for the Romantics of the 1800s, who saw him as a hero who defied higher power in pursuit of essential truths, with tragic consequences. Meanwhile, in the German legend of Dr. Faust, which dates to the 16th century, we get a look at what happens when the devil comes to Earth. Faust, a dissatisfied scholar, pledges his soul to the devil in exchange for bottomless pleasure. With the help of the devil's messenger, Mephistopheles, Faust quickly seizes women, power, and money, only to fall into the eternal fires of hell. Later versions of the story show Mephistopheles in different lights. In Christopher Marlowe's account, a cynical Dr. Faustus is happy to strike a deal with Mephistopheles. In Johann Wolfgang von Goethe's version, Mephistopheles tricks Faust into a grisly deal. Today, a Faustian bargain refers to a trade that sacrifices integrity for short-term gains. In stagings of Goethe's play, Mephistopheles appeared in red tights and cape. This version of the devil was often played as a charming trickster, one that eventually paraded through comic books, advertising, and film in his red suit. These 3 takes on the devil are just the tip of the iceberg. The devil continues to stalk the public imagination to this day, tempting artists of all kinds to render him according to new and fantastical visions.
Tell me, kid, you ever dance with the devil by the pale moonlight?
Devil's children, no love inside. There is a soul, but it has died. And it cries, and it cries. Dance with the devil in the pale moonlight. And put your arms around him and hold him tight. And give up to the feeling and don't try to fight. He wants your soul and he wants it tonight. Dance with the devil in the